Hi everyone, my name is Janique and today I'll be doing a chapter reading from At All, Adam's Brothers Book 3 by Mindy McKinley, presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Chapter 1. Maylie. Maylie pulled her barely working car into a parking stall at work and winced as it stuttered to a noisy stop. The last noise always made her cringe, like glass jars rattling together. Still, every day it got her to work was a blessing. So she whispered a quiet, "Thank you, Charlie," and patted the dashboard lovingly. It was their parting ritual. With a tired sigh, she stepped out into the freezing February air and heaved her giant bag of music and violin out of the back seat. Carefully balancing the load in each hand, she was ready to head inside when her phone buzzed. She swore lightly, transferred the bag of music to her other hand, put her keys in her mouth, and pulled the phone from her pocket. Had she known it was from her father, she wouldn't have gone to so much trouble. Dad, NY Phil audition April 3. No, hi, how are you? No small talk, just down to business. Typical. She didn't answer, and right before she slid the phone back into her pocket, it buzzed again. Dad, spent extra time on the Prokofiev. You've always played that one flat. Jesus, Dad! She sunk against her poor car under the weight of his expectations and contemplated chucking the phone across the parking lot. He would never get it. He would never understand why she wanted to be a teacher when he wanted her to be a performer. Gerard Baer, world-famous violinist, simply couldn't accept that she didn't want the same life he had, and anything short of fame was failure in his eyes. With a sigh, Maylie pushed herself off the side of Charlie, hitched her violin higher on her shoulder, and walked toward the music store with straightened shoulders. The thing that bothered her the most about her father was her reaction. Why was she still hurt by his distaste? When would that end? Would it ever? She would have thought she'd be resigned to be his biggest disappointment by now. Not so. Family drama aside, the moment she opened the door to Hansen music, the dark feeling her father created shrunk to a tiny knot in her stomach. She was always happiest here at Chicago's largest music store, and proud to be a member of their renowned instrumental teaching staff. As she walked through the store, she smiled at a set of nervous parents looking over a new trumpet with their excited daughter, held in a giggle at the teenage boy trying to impress his bored girlfriend with Stairway to Heaven on a guitar he could never afford, and waved at Mr Hansen behind the counter. The lesson studios were at the back, a warren of rooms that held teachers and musicians playing everything from drums to banjo. It was magical. The jumble of muted musical sounds that swirled around her as she made her way to her room made her smile. This was her home. It didn't matter what her father said. She would always. Wham! With what felt like a baseball to the forehead, Maylie found herself reeling backward from a door that had definitely not been open a millisecond ago. Oh dear! She heard Mr Hansen's voice through the sharp pain and shooting stars. Oh my goodness, Miss Bear, are you all right? She shook her head a little, reeling backward a couple of steps, trying to make sense of what happened. I think so, she managed to get out, leaning against the wall. Everything was spinning. This is all my fault, a different voice offered, and she could just make out someone else in front of her peering into her face with a frown. She felt like a zoo exhibit. Are you sure you're okay? Focus, May, she told herself, and after a few seconds she was able to fix her eyes on the man in front of her. She blinked. Holy shit! How hard had she hit her head? Because no man, no real man, had eyes that green and a face that perfectly chiseled. Really, I'm so sorry, this beautiful human continued, his voice dripping with genuine concern. I should have been paying attention. He put out a hand that she didn't know what to do with. Let me help you. Oh, Miss Bear, Mr. Hansen drew her attention with his clear worry. His round face was so red she was worried he might need medical attention. He was twisting his chubby fingers together with worry. Should I call someone? Do you need to go to the hospital? No, she shook her head, happy she could form actual words. I'm fine. She smiled and pushed herself off the wall, ignoring Mr. Too Perfect to Be Real's hand. See? Neither of her attendants seemed to be satisfied, especially when she swayed a little. In a flash, the tall, handsome one steadied her with both hands on her shoulders, but it had the unintended effect of making her knees wobble. Jesus, he couldn't be real, could he? He held her steady until he was satisfied she had her bearings. Only then did his large hand slip from her shoulders. He offered a single one for her to shake. Sebastian Adams. He punctuated it with a smirk that made her heart pound. It's good to meet you, although I'm sorry it was in this way. He simply let him shake her hand up and down for a few seconds while she stared. Mr. Adams is our new tenor saxophone instructor, Mr. Hansen announced loudly from behind him, his face changing quickly from concern to relief. He's a celebrity. Can you believe it? Mr. Adams plays for the Jazzmen. He said the last word with such solemn amazement. It was as if he were talking about the Pope. A celebrity? The Jazzmen? She couldn't process anything that was happening, not with her head pounding and the living statue of David standing in front of her. Meili Bear. She finally let go of his hand in an awkward gesture. A violin. I would have guessed. He nodded toward the instrument hanging off her shoulder with a heart-stopping grin. Miss Bear is the daughter of Gerard Bear, Mr. Hansen interjected importantly. Meili had an urge to kick him in the shin. Sebastian's eyes lit up with recognition. The violin guy? Right, with the hair. He made a motion around his head that indicated her father's well-known head of lush, shoulder-length, highly sculpted hair. That's the one. She tried not to roll her eyes when he looked proud of himself. She hated that hair. After the violin, her father's hair was his most prized possession. Meili wasn't even sure she was on a list of things he liked. Looks like you two are studio neighbors, Mr. Hansen continued helpfully. You'll probably be seeing a lot of each other, I would imagine. As soon as words get out that Sebastian Adams is teaching here, there will be a flood of new students. He rubbed his hands together, clearly pleased beyond his capacity to hide it. Well, he went on after a beat, I'll leave you two be. It was nice meeting you, Mr. Adams. Miss Bear, have a wonderful evening, and again, I'm sorry for the... He pointed to her forehead and trailed off. It's fine, really. Thank you, Sebastian said at the same time. After Mr. Hansen made his way down the hall, she looked at Sebastian, and he shrugged. I'm not really a celebrity, he offered. I think Mr. Hansen is a little excitable. Again, how could he be real? He was tall, clearly built, and painfully beautiful. The most exquisite colored tattoos wound their way up his arms and under the folded sleeves of his shirt. What the actual fuck was he doing at Hansen Music? Well, you heard him, she shrugged. I'm no celebrity either. He let out a laugh and rocked back on his heels. You probably get that a lot, about your dad? More than you know, she confirmed and rubbed at her forehead. It really was pounding. Are you sure you're all right? He asked, touching lightly at her forehead. Concern returned to his eyes. There's quite a lump. Is there someone I can call? I could take you to the ER. The feel of his fingers on her skin stole her breath and sent a long single shiver down her spine. I'm fine. Her words came out breathy. But thank you for the offer. Of course. He straightened up. I just hope it doesn't hurt too terribly. No, it's fine. But her eyes widened slightly when she ran her own fingers over the egg-sized lump and realized how ridiculous she must look. Die. She wanted to die right now if possible. Plus, she added awkwardly, hating the way she couldn't seem to stop talking whenever she was nervous. You know, I'm sure it makes me look edgy and cool. A low vibration of his laugh made her feel strangely warm. All right, well, if you're sure you're fine, I'm sure. Her words came out quickly and slightly clipped. She didn't know why, but she suddenly felt very desperate to get away from his intense green gaze. Everything about him was overwhelming, and her head was truly throbbing. It was nice to meet you, I guess, Mr. Adams. You can call me Seb. And with a half smile he added, it was nice to meet you too. Okay, she ducked her chin as she did when she was embarrassed, and then suddenly blurted out, Bye. He looked a little surprised but laughed and stepped out of her way. Once safely inside her studio, she sat her things down and buried her face in her hands.